going on, guys? MariK here, back with another episode of our history of the Dragon Ball Super card game. Set 5, Miraculous Revival, was a really interesting set in the fact that it brought us new elements to the game. One of the biggest of them being sparking, along with burst. Although burst, I don't like it as much. Obviously, it's good for like overwhelm decks and decks where you that kind of revolve around your drop. But a lot of decks don't do that, and I just don't really care much for the skill because a lot of the times you'll end up milling cards that you don't want to, like super combos or key cards to your strategy. But otherwise, sparking was a fantastic ability, and it completely changed the way the game is played. Whereas pretty much every deck in the game had overwhelm in it, and then they introduced this skill called sparking that revolves around you having a certain number of cards in your drop, almost preventing you from running overwhelm in those decks. So now players had to make a choice between running overwhelm and running the new sparking mechanic. And from what I saw, unless your deck was revolved completely around overwhelm, sparking definitely took hold of the state of the game as the new like defining mechanic as far as gameplay was concerned. The set also brought us something new and unique in the form of wish leaders who function completely differently than the leaders that we're used to. Instead of awakening, they have a wish ability that doesn't really care what your life is at. It more revolves around how many Dragon Balls you have in your drop. Once you had all 7, then you could awaken your leader to the backside, and they would have unique skills that only the wish leaders would have that kind of gave them a bit of an edge. But really, some of the leaders, their main skill that you wanted to use were kind of just lacking in just overall power, unless you were running the Shenron leader specifically. So first up we had Red, which focused around the original Dragon Ball arc. You had Oolong, you had old school Yamcha, we had King Piccolo. We had a lot of like nostalgic Dragon Ball support in this color, and some of it was good. Some of it was so terrible I don't think anyone was insane enough to try and make it work, not even myself. So here we have the first wish leader. It was Oolong, always wanting more. The wish leaders were kind of weird too because they started off as 2 different characters. One character on the front, and then the character that actually made. So it was like the character who makes, summons Shenron on the front, the character who either makes the wish or who the wish was about on the backside, which is kind of different. It just, as of right now, there was no cards that really benefited, like a peel-off leader or anything like that. So it wasn't anything that really could have changed the game. Some of the characters could have maybe taken advantage of that, but not this one in particular. So the peel-off leader gave one of your battle cards an extra 5,000 and lets you search a Dragon Ball from your deck. Not too great considering how some of the other leaders work, but there's a lot of wish support in this set, obviously, since this is the first set that gets these cards. Now, the Awakened side is the more important side. So the Oolong leader has 3 different effects. All the wish leaders had 3 different effects, and it was always draw 1 card. This is all for no energy, of course. Draw 1 card, choose a red or black desire in your hand with energy cost less than what you were at, and activate its skill. This meant you place the card in the drop, you got to trigger the skill, you just didn't pay the cost for it, and every wish leader could play a black desire card, plus whatever color that card was. Now, the final ability always called for you to remove the 7 Dragon Balls in your drop from the game. They didn't go to warp, so you couldn't put them back. They were just straight up gone. Oolong lets you draw 3 cards and give a battle card 15,000 power for the duration of the turn. Not super grand. I mean, drawing 3 cards isn't bad, and giving 15,000 power isn't bad either, but you have to have a card that's going to be able to take advantage of that 15k and actually be able to go for the kill shot. Now, one thing to notice for all the wish leaders is if you didn't kill them that turn, your wish leader flipped back to the front, and you could never make another wish because all your Dragon Balls are gone. permanently. So there was no going back to the other side of the card, which basically meant you were going to get the shitty side of your leader. You weren't going to get to draw. You weren't going to get to use your wish cards. Nothing like that. So it was a really cool mechanic. Just not a lot of the wish leaders were super competitive. They just didn't do well against a lot of the leaders that we already had. One example of a wish card, a desire card as they are called, was just straight up Oolong's Wish. Basically said if your leader was a Shenron, so you could run it in any Shenron deck, you got to draw a card and give a card minus 5,000 power for the duration of the turn. Again, not really good at all, not even worth using. Basically, that just took up deck space. You were minus 5,000, but that's not going to do a whole lot. Maybe allow you to KO a battle card by attacking over it, but most cards don't even have 5,000 power, so you're not going to kill anything straight up with this card unless you played it really early on. And the Wish Leader can already just draw a card, so this was just, to me, this was a really bad Wish card, and I don't think anybody ever really tried to make good use of it. But again, Oolong really didn't really stand out again to do anything, so he was just kind of like a filler card in the set. So each color came with a Wish Leader and a non-Wish Leader. Our non-Wish Leader for red was Yamcha the Hungry Wolf. This is a good version of Yamcha. Back in Dragon Ball, when he was actually kind of like a respectable character, before Dragon Ball Z just kind of ruined him with everybody else's power creeps. Now, this is also an instance where we see both the burst and the sparking effects. So when burst activates, you had to mill the top two cards of your deck. So that was the only way you were getting the draw, the +1 draw on Yamcha. And on his Awakened side, he got that draw effect by having sparking 5. So as long as you had 5 in the drop, you were good to go every turn. And if you had it, he also gained critical for the turn. Then once per turn, you could choose a red battle card, and it could attack battle cards in active mode. So this was a really good leader. It wasn't super competitive worthy, but it was one of the better red leaders. Just because not only a leader having critical is good, but a leader that can give any card the ability to attack battle cards in active mode was also pretty solid, especially because you could use cards that did burn damage as well, like Miraculous Comeback Gohan. You had the GT Goku, or the GT Vegeta, stuff like that. They could really take advantage of that skill. You also, of course, had the cards in the new set, like the new Yamcha that we got. That says if your leader card is a red Earthling for the duration of the turn, he gets plus 6,000, making him 25,000. He can't have his attack negated, and he deals 2 damage when he KOs a battle card. So that leader allows him to attack active battle cards, and he does the 2 damage, and the attack can't be negated. So having a combo like that was actually, it was really cool. Now, this Yamcha, since he specifies a red Earthling, you could actually use him with the Pan leader as well, since she's Saiyan and Earthling. And when you played him, he'd get that additional 5,000, so he'd actually be 30,000. Though I'm not really quite sure if I feel like that would be better than running the Yamcha. I guess it's all situational, because it's going to depend on what you're playing against. Because being able to attack active battle cards might not even really be relevant in the match that you're in, and that extra 5,000 power can make a difference between being able to KO something and not. The only thing I don't like is, again, this is a burst 5 card, and I'm just not a big fan of the burst abilities. Like, the burst abilities are nice if you were going to run Overrun with them, but since you have to run the sparking as well, it really contradicts itself to be able to do that. So I don't know. Burst works great for certain cards and certain decks, but overall it's just not a strategy that I am very fond of. So then we got a little extra wish support for red as well, focused around King Piccolo. However, this support was just really lacking, and it had nothing to do with Namekians or any of the other King Piccolo cards that we had. So while you're thinking, oh, I could run, red-green Namekians, red-green King Piccolo, you really couldn't. The Desire card was already shitty enough as it is, because it had to be a red Shenron, so you had to use the Pilaf Oolong card. And you got to choose a Piccolo, Terra Unleashed, and return to King's Youth from your deck, add them to your hand. The Piccolo was just... it just was not up to par, and probably the worst of the Super Rare and SPR cards in the entire set. Sure, he had Double Strike, but that wasn't really that great. His permanent also reduced his energy cost in your hand by 1 if you had the Wish card in your drop area. So he became a 3-drop, which made him easy to play. And Sparking 10 is not entirely difficult to get to, especially when you're running the Wish deck, since you're going to have 7 Dragon Balls in your drop anyways. But when you played him, you wanted to activate his skill and choose either another King Piccolo or the Desire card and send it to your Warp. And if your leader was a Red Shenron, you got to switch him to active mode. But that's it. Like, he was only 20k Double Strike. Like, it just wasn't... it was a really, really poor excuse for, like, a finisher for a Wish deck. Like, there were just better cards that you could use, and with some of the support from some of the other decks as well, there were just other better cards you could use, even if you wanted to run the red Wish leader, which was not recommended by any means. Then here we got a little bit of Goku support. We got the Feisty Chi-Chi, which when you played her, when you comboed her from the battle area, you got to choose a Son Goku, but then you cost a 1 from your deck and play it. And if you did, you get to draw a card. So you're going to play this Goku that we have here, which for later on would become a much better strategy. But at this particular point, all you had to really do with him was evolve this Great Ape onto him, and it had to be onto this Goku, and it couldn't be anything else. So this was like its own little exclusive combo here. And the Goku got critical, which wasn't terrible. But you get to choose a red battle card and KO it, and switch him to active mode. So there was ways that you could take advantage of that, and like an archetype that kind of went along with it, but it didn't feel like it. But you would also run this pseudo Gate Guardian stuff with the Mecha Pilaf machine. So more or less the deck had to be, it was like a Dragon Ball exclusive theme deck, and not so much focusing around like just Goku or anything. And you would start off with Shu, and of course he's the lowest. You would basically just choose a Mai from your deck and play it. And then when Mai was triggered, her ability would allow you to search for a Dragon Ball and add it to your deck, or add it from your deck to your hand. Which, I mean, okay, there are much better ways to go about doing that. And really, running all this with the Wish Leader didn't really help a whole lot, because it wasn't doing much for the Mecha Pilaf machine as it is. But then when you got the Pilaf himself out, he had 2 different activate mains. One allowed you to search your deck for a Dragon Ball, and then shuffle your deck. And if you had, you had to choose Shu and Mai, and they got plus 5,000 power, so you give him a little bit of a boost to attack with. But his other activate main basically said, hey, we're going to Gate Guardian them, put them all in drop, you got the Mecha Machine from your deck or drop area and played it. It's a neat little combo, because when you had the Mecha Machine out, when he's KO'd, you had to choose a Pilaf, a Shu, and a Mai from your drop area and play them. So basically, it kind of loops itself in the fact that you'd have the Goku out, you swing with the Goku, you swing with Mai, Shu, Pilaf, you send him to the drop, you bring out the Gate Guardian, you swing with the Gate Guardian, you activate Goku's effect, you KO the Gate Guardian, put him back in active mode, Gate Guardian dies, then you bring out Pilaf, Mai, and Shu, you swing with the Goku again, and then you can just take the Shu, Mai, and Pilaf, attack with all of them, and then make the Gate Guardian again, and attack with him again. And it's this kind of little combo that once you got all the pieces you needed, I don't want to say it was difficult to stop, because the deck was not OP by any means, but it just kind of was like triggered this chain of events where you kept picking away at your opponent little by little by little. And of course there was ways to get around it, just kill the Goku. But even so, once the Pilaf machine was KO'd by any means, then they could just loop that combo. But if you got rid of the Goku, got rid of their means for them to KO the machine themselves, then he was just a 20k beat stick that did very little damage to you, and you could just kind of leave him alone, just kind of ignore him like they did in the anime, and just focus on beating your opponent's life down before they dropped another one of those Gokus. Then we had the Baba archetype, and this was kind of a little gimmicky archetype on its own. Of course, it's going to focus around Baba, which she says when you play her, you can choose up to a Bandage's Spike or Son Gohan, aka Grandpa Gohan, from your deck, place it in the drop area. And then you can choose a Bandages from your drop and play it. So, Baba starts off everything and brings out Bandages, who comes out as a blocker, and when he's KO'd, you can choose a Spike from your deck and play it in rest mode. So you're kind of pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get that ability off, because unless they just straight up don't attack, you're going to activate his blocker the very first chance you get, and you're going to bring out Spike, the little creepy vampire cosplay looking dude. It says when he attacks he gets 9,000 power, which, whoop-de-doo, but when he's KO'd, then you choose a Son Gohan from your drop area and play it in rest mode. This is another instance where you could use that Goku if you didn't go with the Mecha Pilaf machine. You could use the Goku to kill the Spike to bring out the Gohan. So then Grandpa Gohan comes out. He's got the activate main that says, choose him along with Bandages and Spike from your drop area, place them at the bottom of their deck, and then choose a Grandpa Gohan from your deck or drop area and play it. It gets plus 5,000 at double strike for the turn. So you get this Gohan out, you want him to die, and then you choose all three of them from your drop, put them back into your deck to play the 30,000 vanilla Grandpa Gohan. Except now he's 35 and he's got double strike. Again, not a super big deal. Now, if you did combine this with the Wish Leader, then he'd be a 50,000 double strike, and that's much more significant, although 35 is not a little attack by any means. But it was a cool little archetype that kind of brought one and then the next and then the next. It didn't really loop as well as the Mecha Pilaf did, but still an interesting archetype to see play out. But again, it was one of those things that really read outside of a few cards and the Yamcha leader. Everything just kind of felt really bland, really lackluster. Like, it was cheeky stuff that you could play for fun, but there wasn't really any chance of any of it becoming meta. Every color also got unique support from this set as well, in a new Super Combo, a Deadly Defender, and a new Negate card. So the Deadly Defenders work similar to the Vegito from the Ultimate Box, who basically said your opponents couldn't attack your leader card. So they're 3 drops, 20k, and they have Barrier. During your opponent's turn, though, when they're in rest mode, they get minus 5,000 power, so they're only 15, and your opponent has to attack that card. So it kind of like is a defensive step almost. And as long as you can keep that Deadly Defender alive, your opponent can't touch your leader at all. Now, some strategies allow you to play these Deadly Defenders more easily than others, depending on your deck build, and some people don't even run them. Some people still don't even run them now. They were interesting at first, but to be able to play them and then have to keep them alive through like multiple attacks is not as easy as you would think it is, especially since they lose that 5,000. But they were really cool additions to each color. Each color also got a Sparking 5 Super Combo, which didn't care about your life. So you could have 8 life, and if you had 5 in your drop area, you could play it and get the same results as you would with the normal Super Combos. Also, they changed it to where these Super Combos don't gain the 10,000 when you play them. They already have the 10,000 built into the card, so you can combo it at any time, and it's going to give you 10,000. You just won't get that draw effect. So Super Combo's got a huge boost in this game. And then Red got the After Image Negate attack, or counter attack, which didn't negate the attack, but you chose your red leader card, and it gained plus 40,000 power for the duration of the battle, and minus 10,000 power to one of your opponent's cards for the duration of the turn. So that's a 50,000 power boost difference, I have seen some people try to combo up out of it. I've seen even fewer people succeed. But what makes this card even better is that it also has a sparking ability. So each of these new negates has sparking 5, just like the super combos, that say you can activate it from your hand by adding a card from your life to your hand instead of using it for energy. This now allowed you to not have to worry about not tapping out. Granted, you had to be a little more careful with your life, because if you're taking cards from your life, then you're going to be easier to finish off. But to be able to not have to worry as much about whether or not you can play your combos and be able to negate an attack was just a phenomenal addition to the game. And I feel like these cards too, they kind of, for each color, they kind of gave like a new breath of life into older leaders that just weren't really relevant. The red for me especially was the set 2 Vegito, because now we've got this amazing negate that helps keep him alive better, and better super combos that obviously, up until this point, we had, Vados? And not only is the sparking just a better ability, but the guaranteed 10,000 is just better as well. Blue is centered around the Fusion Reborn movie, centered mainly on fan favorites like Gogeta and Janemba, and brought about one of the more annoying decks to play against. Actually, two of the most annoying, and they both stayed meta relevant even up to this point with the release of Set 7, just because the Janemba archetype is so, it's so consistent, and if you have the right defensive cards, you can easily just sit and stall your opponent out until they just deck themselves. Gogeta, on the other hand, was a ridiculously OP card that honestly should have never been made, especially considering he is an infinitely worse version than Cell, who Bandai thought was the enemy of the entire game. So first up we have Supreme Evil Janemba, who, again, he had both a burst and a sparking ability. Burst 2 to draw a card seemed to be the new equivalent to Set 3 and Set 4's attack a leader, draw a card. So you weren't required to attack a leader now, but you did have to burst 2 cards every time you wanted that extra draw. On the Awakened side, this Janemba had a lot of power behind him, despite the fact he was rarely used, which we'll get into that in a moment. But you had to draw a card, he gained 5,000 and critical, so 20,000 crit, similar to the Yamcha leader. And for blue, that's a lot of power behind it. His activate main allowed you to place a card in your hand in the drop area, and when your opponent would activate any counterplay cards, they had to discard 3 cards from their hand, which 3 cards is a hefty cost. It's basically 4 because you're also playing that counterplay card. Not as relevant then as it is now, almost as if Bandai knew they were going to be adding more counterplay cards to the game. I don't want to give them that much credit based on the way the game has been run so far, but perhaps this Janemba leader might be a little more relevant now with all those counterplay cards. However, this leader didn't get played a whole lot because we got the other Janemba leader in the Dash Pack set. Janemba also got a lot of support in this set as well, starting with the 1-drop. You got to look it up to 7 cards from the top of your deck and choose a Janemba and add it to your hand, or you get to choose 1 card from the bottom of your deck and add a Janemba to your hand. Obviously, more often than not, this was going to be your first turn play, and you're going to look at the top 7 to kind of add Janemba cards to your hand, so you could, get up to that 5-drop. The 3-drop you evolved onto the Psyche Demon for 2 energy, and he had Barrier to protect himself as well. And then for 1 energy, you could activate his activate main and choose a Janemba from your deck, send it to the warp, and then shuffle your deck. And then this card went to the bottom of the deck, and you got to choose that same Janemba, or any Janemba, 4 cost, and play it. So that's where the 1-drop's other ability comes into play, is you could use him, instead of searching for the top 7, you could add this card from the bottom of the deck back to the hand. Now the 4-drops were where the deck really came to be a pain in the ass. Because the 4-drop in the set, we had Phantom Strike Janemba, who was 20k, he had critical, and when you sent from the battle area to the warp, you got to choose 1 of your opponent's battle cards and warp it. Look at the bottom card of your deck and add a Janemba to your hand from your deck. So you got the free crit damage, assuming they let it go through, or they comboed out of it. Either way is a win for you. You warp one of their battle cards, and the activate main allows you to send him to your warp, and if your opponent had 4 more energy, and there isn't a Janemba in your battle area, you got to play him, or you get to play Janemba with an energy cost of 5 from your hand. So, when that happened, you would warp him away, warp away your opponent's battle card, his activate main would trigger, and it would bring out the Janemba 5-drop, the Infernal Chain. This card also had critical, and you could only play one of him per turn, which was fine. He had Sparking 10 as well, which allowed you to place him at the bottom of the deck, and if leader card was an Evil Incarnate, so one of the 2 Janemba leaders, you got to choose one of the 4-drops from your warp and play it again. So we just kind of started this chain. Once you got the 3-drop out, you went to the 4-drop, 4-drop went to the 5-drop, 5-drop went back to the 4-drop, and it was just this chain of crit damage and warping cards, and with the other 2 4-drops that we'll get to later on, a lot of milling as well. Our Wish Leader for Blue, Righteous Heart Son Gohan, was actually the only Wish Leader that we got in this set that stayed the same character on both the front and the back of the card. He had a similar similar auto ability to the Pilaf Oolong Leader. When he attacked, he gained 5,000 power, and then you search for a Dragon Ball. And on the Awakened side, the first 2 abilities are always going to be the same. His Wish ability to remove 7 Dragon Balls allows you to choose 3 energy, switch them to active mode, and the Gohan leader gained 15,000 and critical. Personally, I feel like that's a much better skill than... Well, I don't know if I'd say it's a better skill. I think it's a better skill than the Oolong leader. The 15,000 boost is nice, but giving it to the leader is something a bit different. Like, they can't Mafuba the leader or anything like that. So there's not as many options to stop the leader's attack. But you could also run this with like the Manaka extra card to give your leader double strike, so then he's, 30,000 double strike crit. You got 3 extra energy to be able to use for combo fodder, or to be able to play another card for additional attacks. So not a bad leader at all. I think we did end up getting better leaders. Better Wish leaders as the game progressed, but for this being our only blue Wish leader at the time, I would say he was the second best. Personally, I think he was better than red. He was definitely better than green. I think the yellow Wish leader is the only one that actually had a leg up on Gohan. The Call of Justice Wish card is also another reason why I feel like this leader was the second best of the Wish leaders. Because if your leader was a blue Shenron, you got to choose that leader and switch it to active mode. So, if you used his ability, gave him the 15k, the critical, you switched your energy, now you can play the Manaka to give him double strike. You could play Senzu Beans if you had him, of course, but you could also play this Wish card and switch him back to active. So that's basically quad strike critical. That's a lot of damage coming at your opponent. That's a lot of cards they're not getting to their hand, and that can honestly lead to game. So this Wish card, while it only supported the leader itself and not anything else you ran with the deck, it allowed you a little more flexibility with what you did run in the deck, because it didn't have to have any particular theme or archetype to play along with it. Then we got a bunch of Gogeta support to go along with blue. We got the 2 vanilla Super Saiyan Son Goku and Super Saiyan Vegeta. They're both 2-drop, 20k, but they have to be the same power to go along with the Gogeta battle cards, because since they're Union Fusion, their power level actually has to be the same to be able to use them as fusion materials. But then we got the Deadly Defender Vegeta, which I think the Vegeta is a lot better than the Krillin. You could play him with this Resolute Super Saiyan 3 Goku. You could also play him with the Powers Combined Goku from the very first expansion, the Heroes expansion we got. Or you could play him with the Creator of Hope Trunks from Union Force. Like, there was a lot of ways to get this Vegeta out. But he had the same abilities as the Deadly Defender Krillin. Now, whether you chose to run this Vegeta versus the Vegito, that was up to debate, because the Vegito didn't lose the 5,000 power, but he was also a 4 cost. And 5 cost if you or not really 5 cost, but you had to wait till turn 5 if you wanted to get that extra draw. I never really waited for that. I preferred the Vegito, but the Vegeta is definitely not bad by any means. Now, the Resolute Goku, you have to evolve him on the Super Saiyan Goku. And he has barriers, so it kind of gives him a little bit of protection. And the Burst 5 basically allows you to pull out the Deadly Defender Vegeta. A neat strategy, but at the same time, Gogeta cards, like, to be able to play the Gogeta cards, you have to union from your hand. So while this brought out a stronger Goku card and a Vegeta card, it almost seemed like the strategy worked better for Vegito than for the Gogeta archetype. So then we got some Gogeta and Veku support. Of course, we got the Fat Veku that we saw in the Fusion Reborn movie. His activate main said, place this card in your drop, and you got to choose a Super Saiyan Blue Goku and Vegeta with an energy cost of 2 from your deck and add them to your hand. And then if you played the card using Union, you got to draw a card. So for 1 energy, you got to take 2 from your battle area. You could attack with him, play him, attack with him, activate main, put those back into your hand. But I don't know, it almost, to me, it seemed like you were just looping the same cards and not really getting much out of it. Sure, you got like an extra attack in, but it almost seemed to not even be worth it, and there wasn't really a strategy with the Goku and Vegeta cards that kind of supported even wasting your turn or your energy doing that. On the other hand, we had the Gogeta Hero Revived, which is just one of the stupidest cards ever created in the game. Because sure, let's give him Deflect. Can't play counterplay on him. Okay, cool. Let's also give him Barrier, so he can't be targeted. All right, let's throw Triple Strike on there. Why are we throwing Triple Strike on there to make him ridiculously powerful? Oh, because that's not good enough. We've got to add Sparking 10, which says, choose a card from your life, put it in your drop area. Your opponent shovels their entire hand into the deck and draws 3 cards. An infinitely worse version of Cell, because 1, Cell does not have Barrier. Cell can be countered, he does not have Deflect. Cell has Double Strike, he does not have Triple Strike. Cell also allows you to keep whatever cards you want, whereas Gogeta's ability is completely random. On top of that, Gogeta got severely abused with Wish decks, because there's so much support for the Wish decks to just play him out for little to nothing besides, activating the Wish ability. It was just a completely unnecessary skill that we did not need in the game. And unfortunately, Bandai has done absolutely nothing or even made mention of how this card is bad for the game compared to some of the other stuff they've dealt with. While I agree Shugesh needed to go, while I agree Bad Ring Laser needed to go, I don't agree with Cell. I'm partly biased, but I don't see how this is a better alternative to Cell. While, yeah, you can get Cell out early, but if you played Cell early, you were an idiot anyways, because your opponent can easily bounce back from that, especially with the way decks are now. Whereas Gogeta pretty much just rips all of your hope away, and then what are you going to do? You better hope you can negate the attack, but you better hope he's also not running the Shenron leader, and then this card's got 40,000 triple attack, triple strike, and that's just, you got what, 3 random cards to hope that you can defend yourself on? It's completely ridiculous. Now, on the cooler end of the Union Fusion support, we got more Gotenks support, and I really had a lot of fun with this stuff. You got 2 new Gotenks cards. We got new Goten and Trunks that support the archetype. The Goten is just a 1 cost that bounces back to his hand, so you can play him on turn 1, swing for 10 grand, and then bounce him back. The Trunks, on the other hand, being a 2 cost, he allowed you to bounce one of your opponent's battle cards back to their hand, so kind of setting them back a couple turns. By far my favorite card out of all the support, though, was the Quick Thinking Gotenks. He's a 3-cost 15k with critical. You play him for 2 blue energy, and then when you play him with Union, you draw 2 cards. Then when he attacks, you draw another card. So turn 2, you drop a Goten and a Trunks. You draw 2 cards to immediately replace those cards, and then you draw every time he attacks. He's got critical. It's just, it was a really... This is the first time I've played Gotenks, and I felt like Gotenks actually had good support to build a decent strategy around. Especially because at the time, I'm running him with Soul Striker, Son Goku, 4 of the Unyielding Spirit Trunks, you got 4 Sensu Beans. I'm untapping everything. I'm dropping 2 to 3 of these Gotenks a turn, getting all the draw power, getting all the crit damage. It was just a really, really ridiculously aggressive deck for blue. And then we got the Ghost Rampage Gotenks, who double strike and barrier 20k. It's not a whole lot, but his auto burst 5, when you played him, you got to choose up to 100 of your opponent's battle cards and bounce them back to your opponent's hand, which is absolutely ridiculously insane. Just because, it plays off of the ability, it plays off of the movie where Gotenks made over 100 Super Ghost Kamikazes against all the villains in the movie. Having to be 20,000 or less is somewhat of a hindrance, but it is a way to get rid of a lot of decks that swarm with little guys or tokens, stuff like that. Looking at you, Goku Black. But overall, that was kind of just like a finisher card. I had much more fun just pecking away at my opponents with, a handful of Quick Thing and Gotenks and getting all the draw power and the crit damage. I also ran Raging Energy Blast Gotenks. This one came from, I believe, set 4 with the Hirudegarn and stuff. He's a 4-drop with critical, but he says place him in your drop area. You got to choose a Goten and a Trunks from your deck, add them to your hand, and switch to your energy back to active mode. So there was a lot of cheeky stuff you could do with this, especially with the Soul Striker Goku. So you could, on turn 4, you could drop this guy, swing 20k crit, swing with your leader. That's another 15, or if you had 5 or more energy, 20. Get the untap 2, use his ability, get a Goten Trunks, untap 2. That allowed you right there. There was 4 energy that you could play around with, and that's, if you added an Unyielding to your hand, that's 5. So then you could drop multiple Quick Thing and Gotenks from your hand, and then proceed to attack your opponent with more crit, more draw power, and it's kind of crazy how all of it went together so well, but definitely Blue Gotenks is one of the most fun decks I have ever built, and kind of gives me a reason to continue to play around with Soul Striker, just because that untap ability is so strong. Now the deck would definitely need some board removal for stuff like your opponent playing Borgos and other stuff like that. Unfortunately, TN is a real hindrance to that deck, but there's really not much you can do around that unless you're running the new counterplay support. Then, just like Red, Blue got extra support that kind of fit all of the different decks as well. We had our super combo with the Gohan. We just had an extra card for Gogeta leaders, which at the time we only had 2. We had the one that came from the starter deck and the one that came from the movie promo. That gave your leader 15,000 in critical for the duration of the battle. Really powerful card to be able to add in, just because 15k is already a lot of damage, but to add that crit damage as well kind of forces your opponent to go, okay, I'm going to take the hit to hold up, do I want to try and combo out of that? Then we had by far one of the best negate cards added to the game. If you guys liked Whis' Coercion, then obviously Dimension Magic was going to be a solid card for you to run in every blue deck. All you had to have is a blue leader, and you got to switch 2 of your blue energy to active mode. So better than Whis' Coercion, and you had the sparking ability that allowed you to play a card from life. So you could actually have 2 free energy, have a card to replace the negate, and give you just much more defensive flexibility than some of the other negates had. Moving on to green, we've got easily my favorite archetype to come out of set 5. It was the Super Android 17. Now, while I didn't particularly care for the character Android 17, nor did I really much mind the Dragon Ball GT arc around him, the archetype itself was really fun to play, and I'm not going to say no to more Android support. Unfortunately, it doesn't really support the what was the current Android support at the time. It was a completely separate art type, and there wasn't really a lot of cards to take advantage of the old Android 17 leader. But the Android support did kind of play together, and we did get a new leader to go along with it, although to me the leader was a bit lacking, and I would just rather play anything else, really. Old school 17 and 18 just seemed to fit better for the archetype than the Super 17 new leader we got. I actually hate how much I disliked the Super 17 leader because the art on the non-awakened side was just perfection. If we could have had that side as a foil for the leader, that would have been amazing. He had the same burst 2 draw card ability, so yeah, pretty much confirms that set 5 and 6 were going to have a similar leader syndrome to sets 3 and 4. Now on the awakened side, he had the same Sparking 5. He gained critical, similar to Janemba and Yamcha, so that was kind of okay. Like, adding crit to everything seemed like a bit much, but crit kind of fits with the green archetype, especially with Android, since we got the Android 17 and 18s to have crit, among other things. But its activate main was kind of just meh. If your opponent had 10 or more cards in their hand, your opponent had to place cards from their hand until they had 9 cards in their hand. Now, in some instances, you were literally going to make them discard 1 cards. Some of them, you might make them discard 3 or 4. But then it's still 9 cards in their hand, and that's all he does. Nothing else. So if your opponent stayed at that 9-card limit, they could still have a hand that's bigger than yours, and your leader is just a vanilla crit guy. That's not really... It's not what I expect out of a leader, and it's not something that I feel like really supported either the deck itself in any way, or just androids in general, especially because the Super 17 support was going to make your opponent discard cards anyway. So more than likely, they're not going to be above that 9-card limit where you're going to be able to take advantage of the leader's ability. Now, I know a couple people did manage to take the leader in top events with him, but me personally, I just don't see a whole lot of use out of him, and I feel like that was more the player and the deck than it was the leader itself. With the Super 17 support, we got a good amount of extra Android cards. Now, we didn't really get any legit Android 17 cards, bar 1, and he had Burst 3 that gave him plus 5,000 in critical, and he was a 2-drop, so you would think that, oh, hey, this might go good in the Android 17 deck. However, since he has 2 specified green, there was no way to actually decrease the energy cost to play him, so even with the leader's ability, he was still going to be a 2 cost to play, and at that point, I would rather just play the Android 17 from Crossworlds that already had the crit built in, already had the extra 5k built in, and because he was the 3 cost, you could limit him down to 2. You could play him at the same time that you could play this Android 17. I mean, if you really wanted the burst ability, then it was another card you could play, or if you wanted that extra critical card. But it just kind of didn't really seem like it was worthwhile. I don't even think I ran this Android 17 in the Super 17 deck. Then you had the Hellfighter 17, who was kind of the thing that started the chain to get up to the Super 17. And, of course, he had Barrier to keep himself alive as well. So he had Union Absorb. So you'd place an Android 17 from your hand or your drop area underneath him to go to a Super 17 with energy cost of 4. So you could just either combo them away. You could have it in your hand, but at that point, it's almost, you may as well just use it for combo fodder to prevent an attack. And then when you play the Hellfighter, get him from the drop area and go into the 4-drop Super 17, who had both Barrier and Deflect, so there was no touching this card at all, bar very few cards that could get around Barrier. When you played him, you got to KO one of your opponent's battle cards, but then for 4 energy, you got to choose a Cell card from your hand or your drop area and place it underneath this card, and then you got to go into the 6-drop. Now, I don't like that the first time we got Super 17 support, it went from here's Super 17 in the anime to here's Super 17 from a random video game where he absorbs Cell, which absorption was not even one of Super 17's abilities. He absorbed energy, but he didn't absorb characters. He didn't absorb physical mass. So it was just kind of, they went in the right direction, and then they decided to go stupid with it because, well, that's just what Bandai seems to do. You could also just choose to go into the tournament pack, Super 17 as well. We'll get into him when we get to the tournament pack stuff, but I like the Super 17 support. I just don't really like the way Bandai goes about using their existing content to just throw in and just add random shit into the game. The cell in question that we got was like Infernal Villainy Cell. He basically functions similar to the GT Goku that came out of the starter deck, where you combo him for 10k and you get to draw a card. This cell did the exact same thing. He also had critical, but you're not going to play him for 4 energy for crit. I guess you could say he was kind of cell support, but nobody's going to go into this cell if they're running the cell chain. They're going to go into the 7-drop every time. So while you did get to draw a card when you played him, it didn't support cell at all, and it really was just kind of almost a useless card in this deck as well. But then you had the Super 17, the cell absorbed one. He's got critical, he's got dual attack, he's got deflect, so you're not stopping him when he comes into play. Since negates aren't going to do anything, because once he attacks, his ability's triggered anyways, so you can stop the crit damage. It is unfortunate that he's only 20,000, considering that he is the end-all be-all for the deck. He's a 6 cost to play by himself. If he had barrier, I feel like it'd be a little bit better, but it's kind of hard to defend him in the end game, because at 20,000 power, he's a lot weaker than most of the other finisher cards in a lot of decks. However, when he attacks, if your leader was an android, your opponent had to discard 2 cards. And with dual attack, that's basically 4 cards. So you're forcing your opponent to drop a lot of cards, plus the crit damage, so if you get the damage through, they're losing 2 more cards from the life. That's stuff they're not getting back. Because it's crit damage, and if they chose to combo out of it, they're still going to lose extra cards from their hand, and so Super 17 he's fulfilled his mission. He's done his job exactly as he was supposed to. The deck is a lot of fun. The only thing I hate is getting to Sparking 10 is not that it's difficult, but I'm one of those players that I came from playing androids and playing Cell to where I'm running, the Android 16 super combo to make them discard stuff. So I'm running, the Toei Overrealm to make them discard a card and give my leader the 5k boost. And then that kind of contradicts the Sparking 10 with this leader. Now granted, I don't have to run the Toei. I could easily run, anything else in place of it. I don't have to run Overrealm cards. It's almost just fitting to, it's just too fitting for any kind of hand destruction deck, and unfortunately that's one of those cases where you have to make the decision between to choose Overrealm and Sparking, and obviously if you're running Super 17, you have to go with the Sparking. We also got a few good generic Android support cards as well. We've got the Dr. Giro that basically he serves as a Champa. I'm not really sure there's a whole lot of significance to playing him over playing the Double Strike Champa or the Double Strike Supreme Kai, other than the fact that he's green and he's an android, so I play him because I could charge him for green energy. But he gives your battle card plus 5,000 and Double Strike if it's a green android. So that applies to both your battle card and your leaders, but he's also already got 5k for the combo. So again, it's going to be 10k in Double Strike. It's exactly the same. The only difference is it's a green card, so if you needed to charge it, you could. And then you've got easily the best extra card for androids in the entire game, being able to look at the top 10 cards of your deck, and you can add a 17, a Hellfighter 17, or a Super 17. So this is going to be your turn 1 play every time when you're playing Super 17. This should also be your turn 1 play every time you're playing regular androids, because if you're playing the 17 and 18 leader, you're going to be playing Android 17s in the deck. And the ability to search out not 1 but 2 is just, it's good. This fuels a card in your drop to get you started with Sparking and Overrealm. And it gives you quick access to whichever battle cards you want to use that much earlier in the game. Then, of course, we got the Hidden Feelings, which is a new Desire card that doesn't really fit any particular Shenron leader. In fact, it doesn't even require a Shenron leader. You just get to choose 2 of your androids with an energy cost of 3 or less and switch them to active mode. So if you already had an established board, if you already had enough battle cards to take advantage of that, say you had a couple of the crit 17 and 18s, maybe you had the blocker or something, you can attack with them, play this, switch them to active mode, and get 2 extra attacks in. That's extra crit damage and extra chance to trigger their abilities. I myself haven't really found a good way to use it, because it is a 4-cost card, and with the androids that you really want to use this ability on, your opponent's not going to let them stay on the board for very long anyways. If they've got crit, they are an immediate threat, and they're probably going to be the first cards targeted down. If you can keep them alive for that long, then, kudos to you, but it's a lot harder to do without comboing away all of your cards. Now, you could run it with a Wish Leader and run androids with a Wish Leader as well, but the thing is, with androids, you are getting your best utilization for them by running them with the 17-18 leader for the energy reduction. So it's one of those things, like, it's a great card in theory. There's just not a really good way to go about taking advantage of it. For our green Wish Leader, we've got Pilaf and Tiny Warrior Son Goku. This is easily the worst Wish Leader possibly that we've gotten just since the beginning of Set 5 all the way up till now. We've gotten more Wish Leaders, but I feel like this is the one that I've never found a good way to actually run it. He gave one of your battle cards 5,000, searched out a Dragon Ball, so just like the other Pilaf leader. The Awakened side, or the Wish side rather, it lacks just anything. Choose a card from your opponent's hand and battle area, place them in the drop, and this card gets plus 15,000 power. Like, it's okay, but it just doesn't do much. There are just better Wish Leaders that you could run, and since some of the cards in the set require a green Wish Leader specifically, there's just not a green Wish Leader that is beneficial to run to even bother with those cards. Twin Onslaught Super Saiyan 4 Son Goku is the perfect example of a card that could have been a great card, but because the leader required to play him is such trash, that it didn't really see much play at all and had zero impact on anything in the game. He had Deflect, 25,000 Double Strike is pretty good. His Burst 5, your leader had to be a green Shenron. You got to choose all your opponent's battle cards and KO them. If something was still there, if they had Barrier perhaps, or Indestructible, you got to choose all of them, ignoring Barrier, and put them in rest mode, and he gained Dual Attack. So, you're wiping your opponent's board, and if not, you're wiping their board of anything useful. He's got Dual Attack, Double Strike. That's a lot of damage you can send at your opponent pretty quickly, but having to use the green Wish Leader with him was just trash. Now, if you could have used the Starter Deck Shenron Leader with him, and give him, say, triple attack on top of his dual attack double strike, then he would be a really powerful card to play. But being limited to that green Goku leader just really hinders his performance. The green Wish card is also extremely lacking and almost pointless to even run. If your leader card was a green Shenron, you got to choose one of your battle cards, place it in the drop, and then choose a green Son Goku with an energy cost of 2 or less, and put it in play. And there wasn't a lot of green Gokus that were worth even playing like that. And even so, to have to place one of your cards in the drop area to be able to do that, easily the most negative Wish card you could possibly play. And I don't even know what Bandai was thinking making this card. There's no logic behind any of it. The whole point to the Wish cards is to be able to use the ability with your leader and to get like a little bit of an extra play. Not to be able to neg yourself to play something that's worse than what you would have KO'd with it. Like, it's an absolutely ridiculous card. The Spirited Search Super Saiyan Trunks, on the other hand, was actually a really good card for Wish. I didn't care if your Wish leader was green or not. You just got to choose a green or black Desire card and add it to your hand. So, obviously, since it includes the black ones, those are going to be the ones you're going to run because this green card is complete trash. But what I liked about the Trunks was that when you played him and had 5 or more life, you got to search 2 Dragon Balls and place them in your drop area. I like that you can run this with any Wish Leader, because you could also run like some GT support in there and run like GT Spaceship. So the Grand Tour Spaceship could play him out from out of the deck, or it could even play this Pan that lets you put her in the drop area and search out the Trunks from your deck. So there was a lot of options to be able to play the Trunks super early, super fast, and to get your Dragon Balls. You should be with that. If you ran him with the Shenron leader, you should be awakening no later than turn 2. Then we got our generic green support. We got the Deadly Defender Android 18, which to me is the best Deadly Defender, because when you run her with the Android 17 and 18 leader, she's only a 2 cost. That's 2 cost 20k. When you're at 4 life, she gets that 5,000 boost, so she's 25 on attack. She keeps being 20,000 on your opponent's turn, so they got to put a lot more effort down into being able to KO her. Then we got of course, our Vegeta GT Sparking 5 super combo that deck's really needed to be able to keep up with all the sparking abilities. And then Shocking Death Ball, which was basically a better full power energy, because not only could you KO battle card 2 or less versus 1, but it had that Sparking 5 that allowed you to play it by taking card from your life. So gave you a really solid card to be able to activate early on, to be able to help yourself awaken if you can get those cards in your drop area. And overall, just good support for green that the color green desperately needed in this game. Yellow revolves around the Resurrection of F movie that we got. There's a second Dragon Ball Super movie in the series, and while a lot of the non-Frieza support was okay, the Frieza support really gave us a lot of good cards that you could play in not just this Frieza deck, but any of the previous Frieza decks as well, since a lot of the support either calls for Frieza or Frieza's army, Frieza clan, and it's kind of all synergizes really well together, especially with not only the new Wish Leader, but with the new Desire card that went along with it as well. On the front side, Sorbet had the same ability as the other leaders, plus 5,000 search for a Dragon Ball. The Awakened side was Frieza, though, so he was Frieza clan, he was Frieza army, and so you could run Bloodlust with him, which you can still do that. You can only just run 1 now. His ability lets you choose 2 of your opponent's battle cards and energy and switch them to rest mode, and he gained 15,000 power. I don't really think I don't know, to me, the leader gaining the power boost is really stupid. Like, the Shenron leader gives a power boost to whatever you want to give it to, not just the leader, and the leader doesn't really gain anything. And this is where the debate for me comes into play between the Gohan being better or the Frieza being better, because with the Gohan, he's got crit, you can give him double strike via Manaka, and you can switch him back to active mode via the Wish card. Whereas the Frieza doesn't get all that. You can still use like a Champa or Supreme Kai to give him double strike, but that's not nearly as powerful as the Gohan having dual attack and crit. What Frieza makes up for with that, though, is with the Wish card that goes along with the leader that gives the Frieza archetype as a whole so much extra power. Frieza probably got more support from this set than any other archetype, even androids, just with all the different cards and interactions that these cards brought. You've got the 1-drop Frieza from Hell that when you played him, you got to choose an opponent's battle card of 2 or less, and you got to switch it to rest mode. So an easy way to be able to KO some of those problematic cards that just either sat there preventing you from doing anything or kind of hindered your strategy. Stuff like Borgos, not necessarily Borgos, but stuff like Borgos, or stuff like 2-drop Rebrian, because I hate that stupid card. And then you've got the other 1-drop Frieza that allowed you to place him in the drop area. You got to draw a card, and you got to choose a Frieza 4-drop or less and put it in your drop area. Now, the reason you would do it with 4-drop or less, because it goes alongside the the Frieza Wish card that basically allows you to bring back any Frieza 4-drop or less. So that card right there, that like is a strong turn 1 play to be able to drop him out and then quickly replace him, because you get to draw a card with that ability as well. So you're not going down in card advantage, and you're getting 2 different Friezas in your drop area to be able to trigger for sparking and to be able to resurrect with the Wish card. Then you've got the Military Frieza, which is a 2-cost blocker. It says when he's KO'd, you get to play a 3-drop from your hand. Several targets for that ability, and easily one of the best Friezas in the game. Now, you could also run a lot of this stuff without a Wish Leader. All of this Frieza stuff can be played with other Frieza decks, and since they're all Frieza's army as well, you can play them with Frieza's Call all the way from back in set 1. So you could bring out that blocker on turn 1. If you ran him with, say, Galactic Emperor at the end of the turn, trigger him back to active mode, and if your opponent decided to attack at all, you were immediately going to be able to activate that blocker, let him die, get out a 3-drop on your turn 1, and when turn 2 comes around, you're already set to be able to have the upper hand on your opponent with just a number of Frieza cards that you could drop. One of them being Frieza Back from Hell. This card was... it was kind of a little OP just for it being a 3-drop. I feel like Frieza got kind of like the same treatment that Broly and Gogeta were getting, where they were just getting a massive amount of fan service. Now, you can only have one of him in play in your battle area, but once per turn, you got to put one of your opponent's cards in rest mode, ignoring barrier, and they couldn't switch it back until your next turn. So it was going to stay there for their entire turn, and you could just keep doing that over and over again. His Sparking 7 ability said that if your opponent had 7 or more cards in rest mode, and your leader was the yellow Shenron, when he was in rest mode, your opponent you dealt 1 damage to your opponent. So you could kind of slowly start picking away at your opponent's life, and since this entire theme, this entire deck, the archetype, is all yellow stuff, you could even run the Dynasty Goten from back in set 4, the lineage support, that was basically a 15,000 super combo on all of your yellow cards. So while you're keeping this card in rest mode, your opponent's attacking into it, you've got a 35k defender, and that's just with 1 card. That's a lot for your opponent to have to get through, and that's a lot of cards for them to have to dump just to be able to kill that card as well. With Revival of the Emperor, we got a Wish card that was exclusive to Frieza, but was actually better than a Child's Wish that we got with the Black support. And the fact that you could bring back any Frieza 4-drop or less. So it didn't care what his power was, as long as he was 4 or less, which was less harsh restrictions than a Child's Wish was. Although for good reason. This one, though, allowed you to play any Frieza. So you can play any of the Friezas from this set. You can play any of the Friezas from previous sets, including Mecha Frieza Returning Terror from Galactic Battle. You could bring back Frieza Obsession of the Clan. He came from the Ultimate Box. You could even bring back like old tournament pack promos like Clan of Terror Mecha Frieza or Occupation of Evil Frieza. There was just so much you could do with this one card. So much you could do with the Frieza archetype and the Wish mechanic in general that you could easily bring out some of Frieza's most powerful cards to be able to either wipe your opponent's board, to pull shit from their hand. There was just so many options you could do with this, and it gave a lot of flexibility and a lot of variability to the deck as well. Of course, with the Black Shenron leader and stuff like Gogeta coming out in this set, nobody really paid much attention to the Frieza support, and I feel like it went under the radar, and it's severely underrated cards as well, if played properly, especially with Cold Bloodlust and it being yellow decks. You could Bad Ring Laser. Like, there was so much this deck could do that some of the other Shenron decks couldn't do. Now, with Bloodlust being put to 1 and Bad Ring being banned, it kind of loses out that advantage it would have over other Shenron decks. But I don't think it's enough of a loss to kind of write this deck out completely. Then you had the Death Ball for the Frieza leader, where he gained 15,000 power, and you KO one of your opponent's cards in rest mode. So, a 1 cost that KOs anything, and 15k to your leader, who's already 15k. And if you chose to activate the Wish ability, then that's a 45,000 leader. But again, it being single strike and not critical or anything like that, it still kind of seems underwhelming. But it would pretty much guarantee the KO of any battle card that your opponent's going to have out. Set 5 also gave us a legitimate Master Roshi leader. We did get the Jackie Chun leader in the World Tournament set, but it wasn't Master Roshi, even though it was Master Roshi. This one kind of follows a similar playstyle as the Jackie Chun leader. When he attacks, you switch one of your opponent's cards to rest mode, but that's a really underwhelming skill compared to a lot of the other leaders we have, and yellow leaders in general. Just they seem to do so much more than this. I feel like Master Roshi got the really short end of the stick on this one. We could have had a chance to have a really cool Master Roshi leader. I don't really think this one saw much of any play at all, just because the desire to play a leader, to play a character, doesn't always outweigh how terrible the card is. And I feel like this is one of those instances where the leader just was so bad that it just wasn't worth trying to run, despite people's nostalgic feelings for Master Roshi. The leader itself didn't get any support from this set, and outside of the Frieza support, there wasn't really an established archetype for yellow. We did get the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta testing his limits, which, it was an okay card. It wasn't really anything super spectacular. He was a blocker with barrier, which was nice and all, but he also had double strike, so you had the option of attacking with him or defending with him. He also had, his auto was burst 5. When he attacks, you had to switch him to active mode once per turn. So, I mean, you could attack with the double strike and then switch him back to active mode so that you had him for a blocker on your opponent's turn. But I don't know, it didn't really seem like it was that great of a card. Like, the SPR art's amazing on the card, but he's just going to sit there and look pretty and not really have a whole lot of playability to him. Especially considering there are just better cards that are blocker barrier cards. Perhaps not for yellow, but I don't think yellow really needs them either. Yellow is more about switching your opponent's cards to rest mode and stuff like that. Not really so much about having these bigger blocker cards that just don't really do a whole lot other than, I mean, it's double strike damage, but if it was critical damage, it would be a bit different. Most of the time, your opponent's not going to care if you give them 2 extra cards from their life. The only exception being if they need to be at a very specific life to use a card ability, but other than that, like, the Vegeta is just severely underwhelming and very non-threatening. Then for our generic yellow support, we've got Deadly Defender Frieza, which is support for any yellow deck, but it's another fantastic target for that Revival of the Emperor Wish card that we get with the Frieza leader. On top of that, we've got the military strategist blocker guy that when he dies, you can play a 3-drop. So then you play Deadly Defender Frieza, and you've got him out for nothing near the beginning of the game, and that's a good solid amount of defense against your opponent so early on that their leader's not going to be able to KO over him. And for the most part, neither are the battle cards, so they're going to have to kind of invest some combo power and lose some of that card advantage just to be able to get over him during the early stage of the game, such turns 1, 2, and 3. Then we got our super combo, our Sparking 5 Beerus, and our Sparking 5 counterattack with Time Magic. I particularly don't care for this card. It's nice that it's a counterattack that you can play by taking the card from life instead of having to have the energy. But choosing your opponent's battle card and switching it to rest mode doesn't really do a whole lot. Like, it can't be switched. If it couldn't be switched for a little longer, that'd be fine. Like, if it couldn't be switched till the end of your opponent's next turn, that would be great. But the fact that it can be switched back to active mode at the beginning of your turn, it doesn't really solve anything, with the exception of cards that have double strike or double attack, triple attack, stuff like that. It gets around barrier, which is nice, but for the most part, that's not really going to help solve any of your problems. Now, Black in Set 5 didn't really have an established play strategy or any archetypes in general. It was just a lot of individual cards that supported different decks or different win conditions. It was a lot of cards that were there to kind of hinder your opponent from playing their particular strategies by giving you a bunch of little cards that didn't have a specified cost, so you could play them in just about any deck. And it was more kind of like a soft check to some of the new strategies and archetypes that came out in this set. Black only got one leader in the set as well. It was the Black Masked Saiyan, which really was a lackluster leader. And if you're going to play a Black leader, if you're going to play Overrealm, you're better off playing the original Bardock Masked Saiyan or just any of the other Black leaders in general. This Vegeta leader was just really underwhelming. His Burst 3 on both sides was kind of awkward. You got to choose a black battle card with energy cost of 3 or more in your drop, add it to your hand, and he gained 5,000. But that's literally it. And most of the time with black decks, you're running Overrealm outside of running the black Shenron leader, which is not really gonna. I don't know. It feels like this leader didn't have a place in the game. It didn't have a place in any particular play style. It was just kind of really just a filler leader, so they had a leader for the color black. Just about the only power card that came out of black in Set 5 was the Masked Saiyan, the Devastator. He was a 3-cost 19,000 with critical, so he did kind of get around some of the stipulations that some of the cards had. Like, you couldn't Child's Wish him because he was 19,000 instead of 15,000. But that also gave him an extra edge as far as being able to be KO'd by your opponent as well. So this card had critical, but he also had an ability that was really unique to this card and this card alone. You had to have 15 or more Saiyans in both drop areas, so this worked really well if you were running a Saiyan heavy deck or if your opponent was running a Saiyan heavy deck like Veggies. And when he declared an attack, if the attack was negated, or if you failed to deal the damage, say they comboed out of the crit damage, you still took a card from their life and send it to their warp. So no matter what, you were getting that damage in. Your opponent just kind of had to choose whether they wanted it to be crit or whether they wanted it to get warped away, which I guess, depending on their deck they're playing, they could want either one. Some leaders could actually take advantage of cards being in the warp, but for the most part, like it didn't really have a lot of an impact either way. If it was something you cared about, then you would let one go versus the other. But either way, it was a really strong card that guaranteed that last life was going to be taken, whether your opponent decided to try and stop that attack or not. Then we got Shenron, the Wish Granter. It was kind of more of a support card than anything else, despite the fact that it was a 5-cost, because Shenron can't attack. Now, he did have a Sparking 7 that said when you played him, you got to draw 2 cards, and then you got to activate one of his abilities. And so you could either choose 4 of your energy and switch him to active mode, which basically meant he was a 1-cost draw 2 that you could combo for 10k, or you got to choose a battle card with energy cost of 3 or less in your drop area and play it. So he could come out and he could bring out another battle card for you to do some damage with. Or you could choose one of your leaders or battle cards and give it 5,000 power and triple strike for the duration of the turn. So you could also combine this card with the Shenron leader to give one of your battle cards just a ridiculous amount of power. But it was kind of more just a support card that didn't really go in any particular deck, and you could run it in just about anything that you wanted to give triple strike to. But triple strike itself isn't really... I don't know, I feel like you could just give a card the 10k in double strike with Champa and the Supreme Kai, and you're going to get almost the same result for little to no energy. I mean, granted, when you play him, you could choose... Well, see, even if you chose the 4 energy, though, you're not going to be able to get the the triple strike, because this card gets the ability on play, and that's why this is a worse Shenron than the 4-drop that we get out of the starter deck, because at least that Shenron is a once per turn ability that you can use, instead of it being a once as soon as you play the card. So this Shenron didn't see a lot of play because of that kind of negative effect on his auto. But if you really wanted to give a card that extra triple strike, then you could. I just feel like the Champa and the Shin were much better cards to play than the Shenron. And speaking of the Wish decks, Black brought with it the best support for any of the Wish leaders. And of course we got the Dragon Balls, which are all black cards. You got the Dragon Ball Seeker Bulma, which once per turn you can search up to a Dragon Ball from your deck, place it in your drop area. We also had the Dragon Radar, lets you look at the top 7 and add up to 2 Dragon Balls and or Desire cards to your hand. You could also grab them from your drop area as well, so if you needed to use your Wish cards again, or if nothing else, you just wanted the extra draw power, you could use it to get those Dragon Balls back. Probably the most used card out of all of this was the Child's Wish. It was a Wish card that you could use by turn to search out a 3-cost, 15,000 or less from your drop area, and be able to play it. And you could play that using the Leader's Wish ability. So you could play it for free, get out your battle card, and there was all kinds of shenanigans. You could do anything from like Shenron Veggies all the way up to the Shenron Zamasu deck that I played. And then you had World Peace, which was similar to Child's Wish, but allowed you to bring out any card, any power level, as long as its energy cost was the same or less than your current energy. So the further the game went on, the better the cards you could get out from this card. Granted, it still had to be from the drop area, but since that's kind of the way the Wish decks focused anyways, is everything being revolved around what's in your drop, it was a perfect fit. It wasn't nearly as used as the Child's Wish, because you had to wait so much longer to be able to really take advantage of it, but nonetheless, still a fantastic card. All of the Black Wish support was just the best support for any of the Wish leaders. Then for Black's generic support, we got Deadly Defender Son Goku, which it's a perfect example of why these cards needed to be 3 cost and 20,000. Aside from the fact that there had to be an incentive to actually attack with it to put it in rest mode, besides it being a good defender on your opponent's turn. But also because you could easily just Child's Wish, if it was just 15, a flat 15, you could Child's Wish these cards out, and I don't think they particularly wanted that. They may not have even thought that far ahead. There are some interactions that you look at and you're like, wow, Bandai really used their head. But other times you're just like, what the hell were they thinking? So it's kind of hard to decipher one way or the other. And then we've got the Xeno Trunks, which is your Sparking Super Combo for Black, and the Power Burst Negate. I feel like this card is really... I don't know. I can't think of a good way to put it. It's not great, but it also doesn't support every black deck you can build is kind of the problem. Because it has the Sparking 5 ability. It also lets you get back a 1 cost. So you can get back... Like, a lot of black decks don't even run a 1 cost, so you're kind of not getting anything out of it besides getting to activate the negate without having to have open energy. But it does almost little to nothing for Overrealm decks, unless you use it before you've had a chance to play a good Overrealm card and you have the cards in your drop. I feel like we should get a black negate that lets you activate it without having to pay an energy cost. Instead of having the Sparking 5 ability, have an ability that allows you to trigger that effect if you have 5 or more cards in your warp. Granted, I know that's easy to do, but at the same time, some decks it's really easy to get the 5 in drop as well. Then we've got these 3 annoyances, which they were kind of also generic support for every deck, not just black decks, but kind of like, instead of them being support cards for your deck, they were kind of like counter cards against what your opponent was going to play. So let's start with the Black Masked Saiyan. He had 2 different autos. When he attacked, you'd add a card from your life to your hand and give him 10,000 power. So similar to the 1-drop crit attackers, except he just didn't gain critical. So that ability wasn't really wasn't really used a whole lot because you wanted him for the other auto, which is when your opponent played a battle card with 15,000 power or less using a non-keyword skill. So, Child's Wish was a perfect example of that. And when they did that, they would have to discard 2 cards from their hand. It was a nice deterrent to decks that like to spam cards without actually playing them. It also worked against like stuff like Chain Attack. And so you could kind of either punish your opponent for playing those strategies or force them to deal with the Masked Saiyan before trying to go through with those. Then we've got the Kami 1-drop and the Dende 1-drop. Both of them have Deflect. Both of them let you draw a card when you played them. The Kami for 1 energy, or rather for 2 energy, if your opponent had 4 or more battle cards in play, you had to wipe all battle cards on the board 4 or less, ignoring barrier, and KO them. So, even if your opponent had cards that you couldn't KO, say they had a 5 cost and then they had 3 other cards, you can still activate the ability and kill everything else, but that 5 cost is going to stay. It kind of forces your opponent to have to really think about whether or not they wanted to swarm onto your opponent. I kind of fell for this, not thinking so straight about it, and doing when I played my Zamasu Wish deck, because I was spamming tokens with the Terror Scythe. Well, I didn't think about the fact of Kami, and Kami being able to come out and wipe my board. Now, granted, Kami can't get rid of the tokens because of the wording and the ruling on energy, which is fine, but it still got rid of the rest of my cards, which kind of did suck. So Kami's a great card, still sees a lot of play in side decks, sometimes in main decks. The Dende, on the other hand, you would place in the drop area, and if your opponent played an energy using a skill, you got to send one of their energy to the drop area. Not as widely used. Was initially, because there were cards that you could actually use it on, like when people were running the Ultimate Box Vegeta Leader. That Vegeta Leader was really popular at the time, and so the Dende could come in and just kind of be a little shithead and wipe away your opponent's energy cards, but he kind of fell out of place. I don't even see him in a lot of side decks anymore because there's not a lot of decks that really place energy without, with it being with a skill. Dende could come into play, I suppose, against the Zamasu deck, the new Zamasu archetype from Assault of the Saiyans. However, I mean, that's 3 energy that you're having to play, and that Zamasu deck, you can rack up energy ridiculously fast, and I feel like it's almost not worth it to play the Dende just because you want to kill your opponent before they get your energy up to 8, and they just steal 4 cards from your life, and you're just auto-dead. So it's kind of like a race against time to be able to kill them before they get your energy up high enough to kill you.